Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CASA LA's Fireside Chat. I am your host, Charity Chandler Cole, the CEO of CASA LA. At CASA LA, we organize the community to show up in life and in court to advocate for children and families in LA County's overburdened child welfare and juvenile justice systems. Through an intentional, restorative, and culturally responsive lens, we train a village of committed, consistent, and caring adults who provide equitable, life-affirming connections. Our vision is a Los Angeles County in which all children and families have equitable access to the resources and support they need to be whole and thrive. Our mission and vision cannot be accomplished until our children live in a world that is equitable and just. That's why we are committed to doing our part to address racial injustice in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, and using this platform, our Fireside Chats, to bring communities and various stakeholders together to have real conversations about what's happening in the world of child welfare in LA County, with the hope of building awareness, informing our communities, activating a safe space for all, and strengthening our ability to advocate for our youth. Today, I have the privilege and honor of introducing you to a phenomenal group of people, all of whom are dedicated to transforming the lives of our youth and families in LA County and beyond. First, we have Stephanie Jeffcoat, who is All of Us or None of Us community organizer. She is skilled at organizing and mobilizing groups to advance grassroots movements in the areas of criminal justice and child welfare. She is also a seasoned advocate who changes the hearts and minds of policymakers by sharing her lived experiences. She recently just graduated from Fullerton College with 5 associate degrees and is now studying at Cal State Fullerton. Congratulations, Stephanie. She is a published author who shares her own journey from incarceration, homelessness, and addiction, and she aims to inspire others with her testimony. And Stephanie, please drop the link to your book in our chat so we can make sure to purchase it. Ricardo Ortega is an active commissioner with the Immigration Commission under Assemblymember Mike Gibson. He is also the youngest appointed commissioner in the Assembly District's history. He is currently the National Director of Community and Government Relations for the Light of the World, an inaugural Los Angeles County Youth Commissioner, and California Youth Connection member on the Executive Commission, and a peer advocate at Children's Law Center. And we need to update your bio, Ricardo, because he is also our newest and very first policy intern here at CASA of Los Angeles. Ricardo previously served as a member of the Mental Health Board for Transitional Age Youth in the state of California, and he is the youngest commissioner to serve on the Civil Service Commission in the city of Huntington Park. Thank you both so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us, and welcome to our Fireside Chat. For our audience, we will take a few questions towards the end if time permits. So please submit a question if you have one in the Q&A. So let's get into it. Youth in foster care deserve to be in safe, stable homes and receive the support they need to be healthy, to succeed in school, and to become successful, independent adults long after their experiences in the child welfare system. Even more importantly, they deserve to not be torn from their homes unnecessarily, experience extraordinary trauma while investigations are pending, and then be thrown back into their families' arms, broken, traumatized, and without any supports to repair the damage that has been done under the guise of protection, like I just witnessed with a former foster youth and her children recently. In 2022, the state allocated new funding and passed many laws to address racial disproportionality and disparity in child welfare, to build a family-focused child welfare system, to enhance services and supports for transition age youth, to ensure the educational attainment and success while in the system and after, and to ensure their economic stability through tax credits, housing, and workforce development. All of this is amazing, and I applaud our legislators that have advocated for these laws and for budget allocations. And organizations such as CLC, ACLU, the Alliance for Children's Rights, CYC, us here at CASA LA, and so many others that have helped to champion these initiatives, from drafting policy to signing letters of support. While it's one thing to get laws passed, it's a whole other beast to ensure they are properly implemented and that our children and families are the ones benefiting from them. So, Stephanie, Ricardo, let's talk about some of the few policy wins that we've seen over the past year or two, and which ones are you both most excited about? Who wants to start? Ricardo, which ones are you excited about? Let's start with you.
Well, I'm excited for all of them, to be honest, because they all target specific populations. And but I think one of the biggest things that you mentioned is very important, that passing legislation is one part of the step, right? And having individuals and youth with lived experience passing these piece of legislation. But we always forget the aftermath of passing legislation, which is the implementation part, right? And a lot of the times when it comes to implementing all these amazing pieces of legislation, the spirit of the legislation gets lost in implementation within, either that's belonging to the Department of Social Services, whether that is the county side. A lot of the time the spirit of the legislation is lost, and a lot of the times the reason why is because those same youth that were participating in those discussions are not part of the implementation part, or don't have direct communication with CDSS or the other state departments that are responsible for implementing the legislation. And so for me, I have been experiencing a lot of meetings with CDSS, and a lot of the times are like, well, that's not how it's supposed to happen. Or is that really happening? And I'm like, yes, it's happening on the ground. And I think is the disconnect there, right, between policy implementation and legislation, because we can do amazing piece of legislation with a lot of support and a lot of money thrown at that legislation. But when it comes to implementation, it is very difficult.
That is so true. And we're actually going to dive a lot deeper into both all of those points you just made, because we want to make sure the policies that are being passed to benefit our communities are not performative. But before we get there, Stephanie, I'm going to tell you about the ones I'm the most excited about too. Even though they're all very exciting, I do have a few that really resonated with me personally. Stephanie, are there any that stick out that have passed that you really, maybe that you've worked on or that you're really excited about?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones that we did last year was SB 1085, which basically said that poverty is not neglect. So what we hope to do with that bill was make it just a little bit harder for social workers to bring these children in under the jurisdiction of child welfare, simply because the family is experiencing conditions of poverty. And so working on that this year is going to be really exciting to see how that really plays out, because we want to make it to where families that are experiencing conditions of poverty are able to come to the agencies and get services rather than having to be worried about getting their children removed from their care. And so I'm super excited to see the work that will be done behind that this year and implementing it.
Yes, and shout out to Senator or Congresswoman now, Sydney Kamlanger, who helped carry that bill in the legislature. I want to kind of go over a few of the bills I'm excited about too, because that one actually ties directly into AB 2085 also, that Holden carried, which is addressing racial disparities through mandated reporting reform. I know everyone that joins our Fireside chats has probably heard me talk about mandated reporting a million times. We're going to talk about it one more time here, and this won't be the last time. So AB 2085 addresses racial disparities and ensures families are not unnecessarily brought to the attention of the child welfare system by revising standards for mandated reporting. It also limits the definition of general neglect to only include circumstances where the child is at substantial risk of suffering from physical harm or illness. It also clarifies that a parent's economic status, such as poverty, should not trigger a general neglect report. So we're going to shout out Children's Law Center, Public Counsel, and ACLU of Southern California for being key drivers of that initiative as well. We also have my friend, Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, who helped pass AB 2159 for reunification services and prevents the dependency court from denying family reunification services to a parent or guardian who is in custody before conviction on the same basis used for parents or guardians who have been convicted. He also helped pass AB 1686, which is related to child support and to reduce barriers of family reunification, and requires child welfare agencies to presume that payment of foster care costs unnecessarily extends children's time in foster care. That one was extremely important to me because I found out recently that part of why I went into the foster care system was because my father wasn't allowed to take me because he owed child support. Even though he wanted me and was there and willing, He was too poor. His housing wasn't adequate according to their standards, but most importantly, he owed child support. And so he couldn't support his child as a result. Is that something's wrong there, right? So there are so many other policies and bills as well. And as you mentioned, Ricardo, passing policy is one thing, but seeing it implemented is a whole other issue. And I would be remiss without saying that currently, as we sit and stand and speak right now, there is over $400 million worth of approved funding focused on child welfare that is currently on the table to be cut by the governor's office, including $40 million that was awarded to the 44 CASA programs across our state. So if you're watching this, if you're tuning in, please find and reach out to your legislators and demand that they advocate to keep the funds that were promised to support child welfare across the board in the budget. And so we see many organizations, and Ricardo, you work for many organizations, and Stephanie, you have also worked for many organizations that have, advanced child welfare work in one way or another, and even the Department of Children and Family Services. And we've all kind of publicly acknowledged that we have a problem and that our policies and practices are not only ineffectual, but are sources of profound harm to kids, families, and communities. And even though we openly accept and acknowledge the truth is that we continue with those practices. We acknowledge we have a problem, which is one thing, but in passing the law is another great thing. But what we need now is leadership that is going to put truth to action, data to action, and policy to action, and start changing how we do business within our own organizations, and purposefully take the lead in seeing how these laws and changes can be realized on the ground. And so, Ricardo, you mentioned earlier that, when laws are passed, we have the young people coming in the beginning to advocate, but they're not there on the end implementing it. I also see in organizations such as CASA and others where we have many missed opportunities to put policy into action. Let's talk about when COVID happened. A lot of young people could have had access to funding through COVID, but no one knew about it because organizations such as ours, either didn't have the information ourselves or weren't passing that along. So how would you both define action when it comes to the moving policy to action? What does action look like? You mentioned making sure young people are there implementing it, but what's action? What's the action piece we're missing that's not really translating to truly supporting our children and families, in your opinion?
Well, I think one of the biggest one was that the state started moving in that direction, right? With AB 46, specifically creating the Youth Empowerment Commission on a statewide role. But one thing because I was working on that piece of legislation and we were fighting because the governor and the state legislature was not putting money into that commission. Mm-hmm. So this commission was responsible for being the youth voice within our state government of a diverse group of youth that need different things. Either you're a disabled student, you have your juvenile justice impacted or foster care impacted. There was no money behind that legislation until I think last legislative session. There was 1.5 million that was allocated to the California Youth Empowerment Commission. So that was a big champion for a lot of what we're talking about, right? Which is how do we actually implement the spirit of the legislation with the youth involvement with the implementation part. And that's by starting to have the young people involved in the implementation process, right? I think a lot of counties are starting to move in the direction of, like, for example, in LA, we have the LA County Youth Commission now, right? And our responsibility is to hold these systems accountable and provide them with the youth-centered approach and telling them we read this legislation, we read the policy, the all county letter, and this was an intent. So therefore, we need to hold you accountable for this, for not implementing it the right way. So I think my message is more of giving the youth the space mm-hmm. and the power to challenge you within your organization as well. Because if we are advocating for change for other youth, but yet your organization is not ready to do that, then I think that's an issue, right? I think you should do self-reflection within your organization if you're not ready to make that move, if you're trying to advocate outside but not inside.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you said that. And more importantly is the to challenge you part, because we're not able, just as speaking as someone with lived experience, we're not normally allowed to challenge anything. We're allowed to come in and support other people's agendas, what other people have in mind, but not have a real voice rooted in our expertise, rooted in our facts. And oftentimes we come in with the solutions, but they're not really respected and valued at the level as they should be. So that's just powerful that you framed it that way. Thank you for that. Stephanie, what are your thoughts on what Ricardo said, but also like how do you define action in this space?
So, I think he hit it like right on the nail when he said, the all county letters can come out and stuff. And I think that's what's missing is that education piece and the awareness. There's just simply not enough training being done with these agencies who were expected to implement these practices. And so after the bill has became law, they're unsure either with what the intent really was, even though we may include the intent language in the bill. Mm-hmm. They say, well, they're not really sure, how to implement this. They don't know what support services need to be provided. There's not enough funding to implement these services. So I think really being intentional around training all of the players that's involved around what we would like to see and what our intents were with this specific policy that was just passed, and how coming together to create solutions for us to work together to make sure that these policies are being implemented.
I love that. And I was speaking with the legislature at one point, and I asked the question, it's why are we getting policies passed? And I used to sit on a state board at one point, and I would see so many bills come through related to child welfare and juvenile justice, and they would just be passed and nothing would happen. And so I just asked, one of our legislators, why is this? And it's either because beyond the passing of the bill, they don't always see it as their duty or jurisdiction to focus on the implementation phase. There isn't an appetite for it beyond the passage of the bill, but there's also not any funding tied to supporting, like you said, Stephanie, organizations doing the work. Even here at CASA, we know all these laws have passed, but do we have funding to change things internally, to train our staff, to do all these things, to, put the policy to action, the data to action? There's no funding tied to that. We actually had to go apply for funding separately to create our own mandated reporting training. We shouldn't have to do that. If we truly say we care about something and we want to invest in a policy for the benefit of our communities, we need it tied to funding. It has to be. And we also don't want the same people that are causing the harm to get the funding. And that's the part I want us to be very clear on, because oftentimes when funding is attributed or allocated for a specific policy, it's going to the same people or the same systems that are doing the oppressing. And maybe we'll just spend a whole other Fireside chat day talking about that. But I think that is so key. And, Ricardo, I just want to keep uplifting what you're saying about the lived experience, because we are often told that we can serve these issues at the bottom and be there to support other people, but it really takes understanding and acknowledging that we should also be leading them at the top, and for others to stand beside or behind us in doing that work, especially when you don't want to do it, but you just want the credit after. Just saying like, we're not doing that anymore. And we need to allow the people like the Ricardos and the Stephanies to really take the lead, because we have the answers. That's the crazy part. And we lead a little differently because we understand that time is of the essence. There's a sense of urgency. We don't really, and I'm speaking for me, aren't really fans of incremental change, because all it takes is a change in leadership, and everything, all the hard work that, was done can be gone. So.
And I think, sorry for that part, I think it's like, it is very crucial, because I think for a lot of individuals that are in these positions have never lived experience. They don't have the experience being homelessness. They have no experience being juvenile justice, spending a day in a camp or in a hall, right? And so they come straight out of their doctor's degree, out of their master's degree. They have strong support systems. And so the youth that they're working for don't have that most of the time. And if they do, it is very difficult to continue that. But I think it's also making sure that being open-minded within organizations, right? Because I think one of the struggles that I had as a commissioner in LA is I have the youth title, right? And a lot of professionals, I would say, do not like or do not respect me because I have that youth part. But then if you tell them and kind of tell them this is my role and this is what I could do if you don't listen to me. But not every young people have that strength of telling these people, if you don't implement legislation the way that it's supposed to, I can go after you, or I can do this after you, right? So it's also empowering ourselves and organizations empowering us, teaching us that we do have power. Maybe you don't have a position in the county or in the state, but just with your voice. And grassroots work a lot of the times, and politicians and organizations are scared of grassroots, right? Because that could affect your funding, that can create some PR mess. So using that as well to leverage implementation of policies.
Ricardo, you just said, I don't think you realize you're dropping these gems. I don't think you know you're doing it on purpose. You may be on accident, but you just said something so powerful because, and maybe I need to process this. Give me a second. Because that word youth being tied to our positions and our names, to your point, is like what's the word it limits us, it handcuffs us. I remember a lot of the titles I had with youth. Recently, I had someone ask me to come speak at their event as the youth voice. I'm like, boo, I'm 36. I am not youth. I am a grown woman. But because we have lived experience, or because we were in the foster care system, we're constantly looked at as youth. Can you represent the youth voice? Can you be a youth commissioner? When we are, but that word youth just does not have respect in these spaces. And that's probably why, and I'm gonna say it, and I hope someone with power is listening, why the Youth Commission doesn't have funding to do what they need to do. Maybe that's why youth commissioners are struggling to even show up to meetings, because they can't afford to, and they're not being compensated or paid well. If we're gonna say youth, if we're gonna look at them as youth and treat them as youth, then we need to provide some of the services and support to really allow them to do their jobs correctly. Pick one. Pick one. Don't diminish the value of people with lived experience by putting the word youth. And maybe that's a whole other policy initiative we need to focus on. Maybe we need to change the language and the terminology around people with lived experience, because we're always seen as youth. I'm about to be 40, y'all, and I am still looked at as a youth voice. We have to do better. So Ricardo, let's talk about that. We need to talk offline and maybe come up with some strategies, because I see some opportunity there. But I also see opportunities within organizations and individually where there's so much low-hanging fruit, and opportunities big and small, where organizations, individuals can help to support and advance some of these policy wins, especially around education, training, and access to direct support. So what are some of the opportunities that you all can think of that you're working on within your organizations? Part of when we decided to create a policy intern position here at CASA LA specifically, because we saw all of these policies that were being passed, and we wanted to make sure our young people at CASA knew about it, had access to it, understood what SILP was, understood what some of the tax credits were, understood what access to housing they had. And one of the main things we did was when we realized that Ricardo would be an amazing policy intern for us, we didn't create what that position would look like in its entirety. We said, hey, expert, what do you feel this position needs to look like? And he sent us this beautiful kind of description of what, putting policy to action would look like for CASA LA. And we were literally, you could ask my staff, we were sitting here saying, well, there's nothing to change. What do? I'm like, slap it on a CASA letterhead. And Ricardo created essentially the job description for our policy intern, because you said it earlier. We need to respect the people with the lived experience. We need to respect those with expertise. And we need to respect those that have not only been there at the forefront prior to bills and laws being passed, but also should be key drivers in them being implemented. And so what are some ways, some low-hanging fruit that you feel, or that you're actively working on now, where we can help move policy along? And I'll give you some examples of what we're doing here at CASA LA as well. Any thoughts?
Well, I think for me, one of the biggest, issues that I have, because my district in LA County is District 5, which is like up in the north part of the county, right? So it's like we're always forgotten. We are like the desert of the county specifically. But in the Antelope Valley, there's so many older youth, non-minor dependent youth up here that are placed here with no connection to the community. And one of the things that I brought here was something that a lot of different spas are aware of, which is like the peer specialist or peer support, peer advocate individuals in mental health. Um, and I thought it was going to be like welcome with open arms, with all of our mental health providers having, youth with lived experience in the organization. But I did not expect the big pushback from them saying, you know what, no, our organization is not prepared to handle someone who was, either a former domestic violence victim, or a foster youth, or all those different individuals. But then again, you're saying that you're having personnel issues with case management. No one wants to do case management. And then I'm giving you the solution of people who are passionate, who want to help other individuals who went through the same thing, but you don't want them. So make it make sense. So what I ended up doing was working with the America Job Centers up in the AV to launch a program to equip these young people, starting with the cohort of 10, to focus on mental health providers who have big roles within the organization, in mental health. And so all these young people are former system impacted youth, 18 to 24, who are ready to take that charge of advocating for other families with the same struggles. They're going to get paid. And on top of that, all the trainings that Charity mentioned, they're going to be paid for. I think one of the biggest ones that I think is very expensive for a lot of organizations is a mental first aider training. I think that's like a very expensive training. And these young people are going to come with those certificates, ready to enter the workforce, ready to be prepared and have a good paying job, at least in the Antelope Valley. So I think that's one of the biggest ones that I'm currently working and actively working to make sure that, our system impacted youth are part of the change, are part of the service delivery part. Because I think the county and others, and the state has also moved in that direction of hiring people with lived experience in these positions of service.
I love that. Thank you, Ricardo. That's exciting. And then the main thing I heard was organizations, hire people with lived experience. Start there. Start there. You have people committed to doing this work. And I just want to say something. We do not want to work in child welfare. We are here because we see a need. This is not where we want to be. It is triggering, it is traumatic, but we realize that the people that have these positions and that have the power are not doing their jobs well enough or fast enough. And so we are forced to come in to these positions to get things done. So if we come in and we raise our hand and we offer ourselves into this space, take it seriously because we are passionate. We want to heal and help our communities, and also pay us for it. Don't pay us at the very low rate that you would pay someone entry level. We are experts, whether there is a degree attached to our name or not. Put some respect on our names. And I'm going to shout out Judge Zeiler, who is in the comments in the chat, and he said that even if they are adults, our youth voices matter just as much. Absolutely. And so thank you for that comment and shouting it out. Wonderful. Stephanie, your turn. Is there anything you're doing or that's low-hanging fruit that either you're doing or that organizations and even individuals can focus on right now?
Yeah, so some of the groups that I'm involved in, one of them that we have is Coalition for Family Unity, where we have about 600 members of parents and children who have been impacted either by the child welfare system or the criminal justice system. And so we've created just a safe space for people to come and share their experiences, but also be aware of what policies are going on, how they can show up and call in for support when a bill is being heard and during the hearing, how they can show up to Sacramento and share just their lived experiences and also express support. And so we found that by bringing the people who have been impacted by these systems together and creating that space for them is something that is just powerful. You know, oftentimes people who have lived experience do this work so that other people don't ever have to experience what they've experienced. They want to ensure that people don't have to feel the same pain that they've gone through. And so we have, like you said, Sherry, people who are just passionate about doing the work to really ensure that our families have the best chance to stay together. So just being really intentional around connecting people and bringing the people who have those lived experiences together.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I'm going to, highlight some of the things that we did here at CASA to really help support some of the policies or even change our internal infrastructure to support policies. One of the things we did was we reviewed and changed our policies and procedures. Every organization has the ability to look at how you're doing business. How are you showing up? What is the language you're using in your mission and vision statement? We removed the words child abuse from everything. And if you find something on our website that says it, take it off. Let us know. Because we want to make sure that the language we're saying is that, yes, we do support and help children that are being abused and neglected, but that the majority of the children are in our system are not being abused. And we want to move away from this language that assumes or even, describes it as such, but rather we're envisioning a world, a county in which children and families are thriving and supported and have access to the resources they need to survive. We launched a prevention and intervention program because we knew that funding was coming down the pipeline. We knew there were opportunities to support our young children and families. We knew there were family-centered approaches finally being realized in the laws, even though this is somewhere we were moving ourselves. And so we created a program to say, we're ready. We're ready. Now that everyone else is finally on board, we're ready. And we applied for funding on our own. The funding wasn't tied to these bills. And we sought out funding and opportunity to support our young people and help prevent the intergenerational cycle of system involvement and prevent 54% of the children from foster care that have children from entering the system. We started to sign on to bold policies and initiatives that we didn't sign on to before, and taking a firm stance in racial and social justice and declaring that it is a huge problem. It is a huge issue and we have to address it. We actively started recruiting a more diverse volunteer base to make sure that our volunteers, our staff, our board members are reflective of the communities we're serving. We're starting to eliminate barriers to hiring, such as having master's degrees. I don't think a lot of people know it, but majority of our staff have master's degrees. And that creates a barriers for people with lived experience to come in and hold these titles and hold these roles and support the work we're doing. So we're reimagining even some of the criteria around, qualifying for some of our positions. And lastly, and most importantly, we are creating our own mandated reporting training because we want our 1,000+ volunteers and our staff to understand how deeply rooted racism and white supremacy is in our mandated reporting laws. We want to create a training that is culturally responsive, trauma informed, and helps people understand the context behind some of the things our families are encountering and provide solutions, opportunities to support and remove the culture of fear we see when it comes to reporting, so that the children that actually need to be supported by our child welfare system are supported. Children that are actually being abused and purposefully neglected fall through the cracks every day. They're ignored and they're the ones you see showing up on news stations because we're so focused on criminalizing and punishing children and families because of poverty that the children that actually need our support are falling through the cracks, are ignored. And so we're doing something about that here at CASA LA, and also through our policy intern and through the more of the work we're going to do to build out a policy, potentially arm here. I'm just putting it out there. I don't know what's going to happen, so that as policies coming down, our CASAs, our volunteers are aware of it. They know what they can link our young people to when it comes to housing, education, jobs, employment, mental health support. It's imperative that our CASAs, our volunteers know what their young people should be having access to. And so we have fortunately been doing a great job of that already, and just making sure that we're staying on top of all the new policies that are coming down to continue to support that. I'll stop there because we're doing a lot, but I want to hear from both of you. If you could draft and pass any policy that would have a real effect on our most vulnerable children, youth, families, and communities, what would it be and why? If you have full power and reign, what would that policy be? Or maybe it's a few.
I can go first. So there's one that's really dear to my heart, and it's just adoption, the way these closed adoptions, and when your child has been taken by child welfare, how you just have no access until they become an adult, and that's if they come to look for you. And I just think the way that those policies are designed, they say it's in the best interest of the child, but that child is just separated from their biological family forever.
Mhm.
And so that is one that I would love to see changed. Not saying that, any parent should just be able to pop up and say, hey, I want to see my child. But I think it should be looked at more on a case by case basis. Like, what were the reasons that the parents' rights were terminated? Why did the adoption take place? Was the adoption, a real adoption? And so that is something that is dear to me.
I love that, Stephanie. And to your point, was it a real adoption, and what is the context around the adoption? There's so many children who, and this breaks my heart because we hear these stories all the time. There are so many children that have parents fighting for them, that want them, that may be experiencing incarceration and are literally powerless to do anything about it, to make arrangements. There are no opportunities for parents to really support that process. And if they have any of these barriers, or they have any of these marks against them, or if they don't meet the timeline that they give you to get your child back, these children can be adopted out. It's just like, oh, you didn't meet the timeline, 18 months, whatever it is. And these children are adopted out when they have parents that love them, that want them, when they want their parents, when they're confused and don't understand why I can never see my parent again. I'm gonna try not to get emotional because there are so many children out there who are, and it reminds me of slavery. Like, let's just talk about it. Like modern day slavery, where children are ripped from their parents' arms and we are powerless because of what? Our laws say we can do this. And Black children, Native American children, are disproportionately affected by these things. I love that law. Let's pass it. Let's find somebody to carry this bill. Let's draft it. Like, let's do it.
And if I could just comment on what you just said, Ms. Charity. I was in jail for 6 months when my daughter was adopted, and she was 18 months. She'll be 7 this year. I still have not even ever seen a picture of her. And when I say I've completely turned my life around, like, I'm almost on my way to law school, and I still have not even had the opportunity to see a picture of my daughter. And so in situations like that, if we know what mass incarceration has done to families, and then they're just like making it worse by permanently severing the bond between a parent and their child just because the parent was incarcerated.
That's not okay. That's not okay. And I'm sorry, I just feel like I need to take a moment of silence because this is something you grieve. Like, it's not okay. Okay, see, this is another reason why people with lived experience probably shouldn't be doing fireside chats, because we always crying. It's triggering, it's traumatic. But I'm so sorry, Stephanie. And if you're ready to pass a law or start something, I'm ready to stand beside you and fight for such a policy. Ricardo, what do you have? Is there a policy, if you pass any policy, what would it be?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I've been thinking about lately, because I'm almost graduating with my bachelor's degree, right? And so I was starting thinking about maybe I want to go for my doctorate degree, right? So maybe going, into something with like political science or international relations. But then I started looking at how much it's going to cost. And then I started looking at, wait a minute, okay, yes, there's scholarships out there, but if you're gonna go for a doctorate degree is like a basically full-time job, that in itself. And so I was looking at, also like data around the number of former or current foster youth who complete, their associate's degree or even a bachelor's degree is very low. And I think it's very important for us to have a conversation about why is it, what are systems, and I know that the state has been doing a lot of work, but let's be honest, like California is expensive, right? To live here, to go to school, and just having opportunities to improve ourselves. Like Stephanie's a prime example of that, right? Like going to Fullerton, getting 5 associates, degree, and then going to law school. That's amazing. That's like you don't hear those stories a lot. So it's like, how can we find more Stephanies in child welfare, right? With those same lived experience, and that we do have the time and the wish to do so. So figuring that part out. But I think one of the other ones is like, it was just like a dumb wish, I think it will be. But how many of our state legislatures, I mean, besides, I think Brian, right? I think Brian is the only one that has
Yeah.
somewhat experience with what it's like to being touched by a system, but no one else.
Yeah.
So why is it that there's no specific body besides the Youth Empowerment Commission, but no one else? And these are individuals passing legislation, writing legislation. Yes, they're having our input, but there's no one there full time that can give them advice or tell them, write this piece of legislation. Have a person in the spot in our state legislature and our state government to kind of tell them this is what's going on. And also eliminating also the bureaucracy within organizations, right? Because organizations at the end of the day have to comply with some grants. Some grants might not align with what the youth are advocating for, right? So figuring those part out as well. So I don't know, just having someone in government who has the responsibility to be well connected and well known within child welfare and other youth spaces.
Oh, let's talk about that. We're going to talk about that right now because that is so important. And I don't think everyone here knows this about me, but I used to be the president of a political action committee. And I also have a consulting firm where I did a lot of political consulting. And I would have people come to me all the time wanting to run for office. And, they would want me to help them decide what platforms they wanted to have for their race. And I'm like, how about you don't run? Because if you're not coming into this space knowing that homelessness is an issue that, either personally affects you or that you're extremely passionate about addressing, or there's certain issues that you really care about versus saying, what's the hot topic this year? And focusing on that and making up things about why you're the person for the job. We have so many people in office, Black, brown, and white, who should not be in office. Democrat and Republican, who should not be in office. We need more people with lived experience deciding our policies, writing our laws, advocating for their communities that are in their communities, that aren't afraid to walk in their communities, running for office. And we just have too many people that are in office that see it as, something that see it as power, that see it as an opportunity to leverage power or be a part of a cool group of people. I don't even know what it is, but we have way too many people. And if we had a law that said X percentage or amount of people in office need to have some type of lived experience, my goodness, I think we'll get some work done. That's why when Ricardo runs one day, we're going to try to get him to run for office, y'all. We're going to put all our energy and monies behind him, okay? Because we need more people with lived experience in office because we just lead differently. We're intentional. And do we have amazing people in office that do not have lived experience that do an amazing job? Absolutely. But we have just as many that are causing more harm. I love that. Also, if you have experienced the child welfare system, juvenile justice system, you should not have to pay for college. That is something I actually agree with wholeheartedly. I owe so much in student loan debt, and I am in my last year getting my doctorate. So this time next year, Dr. Charity, y'all, address me as such. I don't want to hear anything else. If you don't say Dr. Charity, I'm just gonna be like, who are they talking to? Who? And the percentage of former foster youth with doctorate degrees is under 1%. I don't even think we have a blip on the map anywhere. And we change that by eliminating the barriers to us accessing college. Let's talk about how we're treated in college, making sure colleges and universities are more culturally responsive and understanding and trauma informed to young people that are trying to get a college degree. Because y'all got to show up differently. And we just need to, make college free for anyone that has, that's been in the foster care system, period.
I was gonna say, I mean, yes, college is one big important, but accessibility to college, right? Because
Yes.
for me,
Yes.
I have to drive 2 hours to Carson for Dominguez Hills because I live in Antelope Valley. And then the nearest one is CSUN, but that's an hour and 45. So I have a car, but not every youth has access to car or a reliable transportation to go all the way into, you know, those more urban cities. But I was also gonna say data. I think that's like the biggest part. Everywhere I go, it's like I ask for data and they're like, well, we don't have it yet, or it doesn't exist, or it takes them 6 months to collect data, right? And so one of the biggest ones that I've been asking DCFS is like, where is the heavy concentration of where you're putting specific age groups of youth? Are they, you know, like 14 to 18 or 14 to 21? Are they all in the AV? Are they all over here where they're at? And they don't know. So how can you expect the system to really care for youth, for system impacted youth who are in foster care if you don't even know where they're at? So that's just one question.
Well, data equals accountability. So if we can say we don't have it, or we're not collecting it, why? That should be another law required. We need data, so that we can make the decisions, so that we can advocate correctly. So I love that. What would my law be? So I have so many, and I like all of y'all, so those adding those to my list. But I think it's so important as we talk about all of the laws that have been passed now, and we realize how terrible the outcomes are for young people exiting care when it comes to incarceration, homelessness, and poverty. We are literally cultivating and developing our next generation of inmates and not leaders. But then we also have so many community-based organizations, a lot more that are ran by people with lived experience. We have a lot of just individuals and people out there in the trenches, day in and day out, doing the work, helping to support prevention efforts, helping to support intervention efforts, helping people once they leave the system, help them get to college, mentorship, et cetera, et cetera. We should be funding them. It should be mandatory that when funding is tied to laws and policies, or that it doesn't go to the systems. It doesn't go to DCFS. It doesn't go to Department of such and such. It goes to the community-based organizations. It goes to the people that are doing the work that the community trusts. You can't take my kid and offer me a service at the same time. No, thank you. And then wonder why it's not working. We have to talk about that, and no one wants to talk about that. We invest millions and millions of dollars into systems that are not working. Now I'm just going to leave it at that, because I got so much to say. Y'all know I'll be getting in trouble all day. I don't know how I'm still here, y'all, because I stay getting in trouble. But man, we're going to talk about the report that just came down from DCFS. Y'all haven't even seen it, but check out our Racial Justice Committee meeting, because we're going to be talking about it and some of the recommendations and opportunities there, where funding should not be going back into systems, but they should be going into communities, because we actually have proof, and to your point earlier, Ricardo, data, that y'all not the ones that should be doing it. Funding, it should be mandatory that funding goes into communities. Let's also talk about the check we give providers, we give foster parents when children are removed from their homes because of poverty. How about we pass a law that you give that check to the parent? When I was in my—
Or the fact that—
Go ahead, Ricardo.
Or the fact that why is it that you know, some youth who have, you know, psychotropic medication, their payment is about $5,000 to $7,000 depending on how heavy that medication is, right? And yet, if you are a relative caregiver, you might only get like $980 or $1,000, but yet is the same youth with the same trauma. It's just it's a relative.
Yes, Ricardo, let me tell you, I have been doing research on my past because I've suppressed so much of my traumatic experience in the system, because I know this is a secret, but I have been writing a book for the past 10 years. I'm almost done. I know I wasn't supposed to say it, but I'm saying it. I've been doing research on like the group home I was in. I found a whole audit report that existed while I was in there that literally I broke down crying in my room the other day with my husband standing there like, what is happening? Because I found an audit report of the group home that I was in, the level 12 group home that I was in, that literally showed most of the traumatic things that happened in our group home, from the not receiving education, covering up of case plans, not having assessments, taking our money. And this hasn't made media news. This was 18 years ago, 18, 19 years ago. But the report was there and I found it. And it literally, I felt like for the first time in my life that someone believed me. But I also saw that because it was a level 12 group home, that they were getting $5,600 a month for me being there. And if you understand why I ended up in the system in the first place, because I got caught stealing underwear, because I used to steal clothing and food all the time for my siblings. I got caught stealing underwear for my little sister and was put in jail for it, put in juvenile hall. And then because my mother couldn't come pick me up from jail the second time, because I violated my probation and was sent back to jail because I got a job at Hometown Buffet. And they said every time I went to work, I was running away and that was a violation of my probation. So it's don't steal, but also don't try to provide. And so the punishment after that, because my mother couldn't risk losing the job she got through welfare to show up to my court hearing, she didn't show. And I was put in a level 12 group home. Said, just give me a ride home. Give me a ride home. That'll be cool. And that group home was getting $5,600 a month for me. If my mother, and that was 3 times her monthly income. If they gave my mom $5,600, she could have took care of all 6 of her kids. I would not have to be stealing food and clothes from the store. We would have been in a much better place. And so I would love to see us take all these investments that we're putting into this best interest of the child when that's not actually what's happening. If we're really breaking down that term best interest in the child, and I think I may dedicate a whole fireside chat to that. It wasn't in my best interest to go to juvie twice and to be put in this foster home where I was exploited. But somebody made a big check off of me. We're gonna stop there. We should get that law passed, all these law passed. I hope you're taking notes, Ricardo, because you're a policy guy now. So we need to figure out who wants to lead this and start, but so many opportunities for us as organizations and individuals to support these initiatives. And as individuals, people sitting here right now listening, the opportunities you have are, one, to check your bias. Check how you think about children in foster care, how you think about parents, families. Our parents and families are not respected in this space. We are looked at as criminals. I'm literally having conversations as we speak with the powers that be, because if a report is made, you are logged as a perpetrator. Whether you did something wrong or not, whether you're proven guilt or not, you are automatically seen in the eyes of the system as somebody who perpetrated their child. Their child is seen as a victim. And even once it's unsubstantiated and they clear it up, you are forever seen in that system as somebody who causes harm to people. Like, that's the terminology we use. We need to really do our homework about why children enter the system, really check our bias, ask ourselves, how do we show up for our community members, how our neighbors? And it's a daily thing. To check your bias is a daily thing, whether you're Black, brown, or white. As a Black woman, I have to check my bias all the time. And that's okay, because I'm a better person because of it. Walk into your organizations. You could work for an organization, whether you're leading it or not. Question everything. If something doesn't feel right, be bold and courageous and say, hey, that language we're using is harmful. Hey, have you heard about this policy that we should be implementing? Hey, that policy is kind of bad. There's little things we as individuals can do. Individuals are simply people that show up every day to do a job, to do somebody else's work. We have so many Black and brown people who are wearing badges, who are social workers, attorneys, judges, working for organizations and filling these roles because we're checking a diversity box, but are literally being sent out to do the dirty work for these policies. Even when we talk about blind removals, we have so many social workers that are afraid of blind removals because they're saying, I'm not racist. And we're not saying you are, but we're saying that you are being used to do somebody else's dirty work. And under the guise of saying, but we have so many Black and brown social workers. You have no control, you have no authority, you are doing your job. And when you question that job, it could be a whole other issue. And that's why we see so many social workers who are burnt out and who are just checking in and doing their job and feeling powerless. As individuals, we got to do better. We got to do better. And we have to question things, or we have to say, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this job. If it requires me to hurt my neighbor, if it requires me to inflict harm, if it requires me to have to be so numb and so disassociated from the humanity and morality or immorality that's happening, that I'm just showing up for a paycheck. Is that the paycheck you want? And so organizations, look at your policies. Look at how you're doing business. Look at your websites. What is the message you're telling the world that you do? Is it that you advocate for children that are abused or neglected? That's not what we do. We advocate for children that need to be supported in this system. We do advocate for children that are abused and neglected, absolutely, but that's not all that we do. Because a lot of these children are abused while in the system, neglected while in the system. And we're ensuring they're thriving. We're ensuring our CASAs are showing up and supporting them and being that person that's going to have their back, that's going to trust them, that's going to believe them, that's going to ensure that their true best interest is documented in our reports so that our judges can make trauma-informed and culturally responsive decisions that could change the trajectory of their lives. I am so grateful for the work we do here at CASA. I never wanted a job where my paycheck was tied to my advocacy, but if there is one, this is it for me. Because seeing the extraordinary change, the transformation, the support, the ability to work with judges and attorneys and social workers and people that do care, that want to change, that want to see systemic change and joining arms in support of one another, because it's going to take a united effort for us to get there. It can't just be one organization or one person acting to change policy. We have to show up united, confronting injustice, resisting things that are wrong, being bold and courageous. And the question is, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to move policy to action? I am. Are y'all? Y'all ready? All right. If you're ready, in the chat, put yes. Let us know. Thank you, everyone. We're just going to close there. We're just going to close there. I appreciate you so much, Ricardo and Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. Back to Beyonce.